Welcome back to the 15,000 acre challenge here on the Huron County, Michigan 16X map. We are right in the middle of our very first spring planting season, and things are really starting to feel big around here. Over the last couple of episodes, we've been hard at work creating not one, not two, but 3 brand new 600-acre mega fields. And today we're putting them to use as we kick planting in a high gear. We started the season off by rolling out the Bourgault air drills to get our very first crop in the ground, 600 acres of oats. That was a huge job, but we got it done. From there, we shifted gears and jumped into our second mega field. And this time we decided to go all in with our very first soybean crop. To make it happen, I brought out the big iron. For case IH2160 early riser planters, each one a 36-row monster, all running side by side in one field. It's been an amazing sight watching all 4 of these planters work together, and we're already closing in on the halfway mark of planting this massive 600-acre block. Of course, planting at this scale means we're burning through seed and fertilizer at an unbelievable rate, but we're ready for it. I've got our unpreferred seed runner and our big fertilizer tender trailer parked on standby, ready to roll into the field and top off all 4 planters whenever they run low. That way, the operation never really slows down, and those planters just keep chewing through the acres. We've also got some backup working ahead of the planting crew. I got a couple of our Case Steiger 580s out front, pulling sulfur cultivators, smoothing out the ground that we plowed earlier in the season and getting it ready for the planters to come through. They're just about finished with this field now, and once they're done, we'll be sending them down to our 3rd mega field, so they can get a big head start on working the ground down there before the planters arrive. Once we wrap up planting soybeans here, the planters will be on the move again, heading down to that 3rd field to switch crops once more. And this time, we'll be going big with our very first corn planting of the series. That's another 600 acres of corn going into the ground, which means that by the time we're finished today, we'll have oats, soybeans, and corn all planted across massive mega fields. But the work doesn't stop there. We've still got 1 more mega field to create this year, and that'll bring our total to 4 giant fields in year 1. Once the Steigers finish cultivating the 3rd field, we'll be hooking those tractors back up to the plows and diving straight into ripping up another 600 acres to create our 4th mega field. By the time that's finished, we'll have a grand total of 2,400 acres ready to farm for this first season. And that's just the beginning of this 15,000 acre challenge. It's still only year 1, but the scale we're already farming at is insane. Every step feels bigger than the last, and I can't wait to see how massive this operation will grow over the seasons ahead. We got a lot of work ahead of us today, but that's just how we like it here on a mega farm. So let's fire up the engines, hit the fields, and keep pushing this 15,000 acre challenge to the next level. If you're looking forward to the 15,000 acre challenge, please like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.